Kevin Schreiber is the president and CEO of the York County Economic Alliance. He's probably too young to even remember that stuff. But he came up with some specific York County economic data that we wanted to get to you this morning as we're trying to help you wherever you are with your job or lack of same at the moment. And this was all commissioned with the Fourth Economy, a Pittsburgh-based economic consulting firm. And it will, as Kevin said to me, much of it will validate what you might suspect, but it's good to put the numbers to this in some objectivity. Kevin Schreiber, president and CEO of the York County Economic Alliance, joins us. Good morning, Kevin. How are you?
Morning, Gary. I'm great. May the 4th be with you.
Oh, thank you. See, Mark, it's gotten
that
contagious.
Banter with you and Mark.
Yeah. Well, thank you. You're probably too young to remember Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom, right?
No, but I enjoyed hearing you describe it. That was actually
okay.
That's quite good.
Now you'll have to go back. You'll have to go back to YouTube. Anyway, so what is new now on the front here? We've been keeping an eye on your website there. The York County Economic Alliance has put together a great website, and I hope people will check that out. And you can talk about the Prepared York. But some new information out, and people are interested, what are we doing to help businesses? And you've got some of that stuff for us this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks again, Gary. I do appreciate being back on and chatting with you. And I think, globally speaking, from sort of a macro perspective, obviously, first and foremost, encourage people to go to www.preparedyork.com. Thank you for getting that word out there. We continue to compile resources and information and push it out and take the anxiety out of distilling all that information that comes at us on a daily basis. Take the anxiety away from you, and we put it out there.
And let me just insert there real quickly, Kevin. What they have on that, if you go to preparedyork.org, I've had a lot of people that say, well, what can I do? And I said, go to preparedyork.org. It seems to be a great place. Restart resources, community resources, webinars, virtual events, small businesses and nonprofits, employees impacted, healthcare, tips for employers. I mean, you hit on those, and you're getting a lot of really good information. So hats off to you guys for putting that thing out there, because I think it's a really good resource for people to hit into that have all these kinds of questions that I know people like me can't answer too well.
Thank you. Yes, we've tried to, anyone economically impacted by this crisis, which at this point, there's very little of society that hasn't been affected. And, you asked the question sort of, where do we stand right now? I think first and foremost, there are signs to be optimistic and positive. Obviously, 24 counties opening last week, resuming construction activities, some certain outdoor activities, things like that. So obviously, I think there's light in the tunnel, and, we are flattening that curve. So I think we all are doing our part. But what we rolled out actually via Prepared York last week was some economic data. So if you go to Prepared York, there is a copy of this entire PDF slideshow. We also rolled it out with a public webinar with Fourth Economy. But essentially, as this crisis started to unfold and really affect Pennsylvania, we had engaged Fourth Economy, Pittsburgh-based firm, to do some economic impact analysis of York County just to get our hands around this. And data is hard to collect, especially real-time data, because typically it trails a little bit, and obviously things are changing on a daily basis with respect to this crisis. So we rolled this out last week with a public webinar, and essentially, some of the key takeaways are obviously, this, as I noted, it validates what you might suspect, so that there is very little of our daily lives that we hold dear that have not been affected by this. 4,000 businesses that have been forced to close. We have a host, of those 4,000 businesses, we have near 75,000 people who are employed in those businesses right there. And I'll kind of touch on three areas: the private businesses that are reopening, the individuals, and then sort of the return to some new normalcy. But what you might suspect, some of the key takeaways, we suspect that we could have a 20 to 30% business failure rate in York County as a result of this crisis. So that's 20 to 30% of the businesses that existed pre-COVID may not exist post-COVID. And as you might imagine, that directly correlates with the time at which we can reopen and how soon we can get that back to some movement in the economy. You cross that with the PPP program and some of the other SBA programs and state programs that businesses have applied for. We estimate, now this was before the second round of PPP, because we had just, collected this data before that went live. but only about 20% of businesses in York County were able to secure PPP funding. So even if that increased and ticked up a little bit in that second wave, which we know was also exhausted pretty quickly, as this crisis continues to unfold, we could have 20 to 30% of businesses fail, and only about 20 to 30% who are able to garner the support of the PPP program. So that's when cash on hand really becomes critical. And we know it was a Forbes analysis. Most businesses have, $10,000 cash on hand. So we know that as this continues to evolve, those businesses who were closed, who did not access PPP, who have limited resources on hand to carry them through, and who still have all of the existing costs that they may have had before. They still have rent. They still have some level of payroll, even if it's just themselves or a few employees. We know that becomes very critical, and they're right on the vulnerability line of failure. So that's when, how soon we can get through this crisis really becomes absolutely vital.
Kevin Schreiber, the president and CEO of York County Economic Alliance.